When you think of dessert, do you think of those tiny, perfectly crafted and colorful items at the bakery, or do you think of your grandma's huge, decadent, and somewhat rustic brownie? For me, there's nothing quite like the homemade option when it comes to dessert, and today's recipe is a great entry point for any home baker. This is the classic carrot cake. Folks, welcome back to another episode here on the channel where today I, or more appropriately my partner and resident baker, will be showing you how to make a delicious and importantly very forgiving carrot cake. This recipe follows the classic combination of fresh carrots, some well-placed spices, and a mildly sweet cream cheese icing, which would make your mama or your mama's proud. So with that said, let's get into it. Obviously, we're going to need some carrots, and these carrots can be large or small, pretty or ugly, it doesn't really matter. In my case, this was about 4 or 5 of these very large carrots, but you might need more or less. Just use whatever you need to end up with about 3 cups worth once shredded. But before we shred these, you'll want to quickly run your peeler down them to smooth everything out and remove that exterior layer and subsequent bitterness. Also dirt. Once you've done this for each carrot and they're looking as smooth as the B-roll intro to this video, then you can move these to the side and grab your box grater. With your box grater in hand, grab your first of several carrots and get grating. You want to use the side with the largest holes as we want to keep that moisture, sweetness, and texture in this recipe. I also recommend doing this over a plate to keep your station a little less messy. Once you've grated that first carrot, just repeat this process until you've done your second, third, and fourth carrot, and with that done, you should have a pile of sweet, fragrant, and vibrant shredded carrots that look something a little bit like this. With that done, move this to the side and grab yourself a large bowl, and then scoop up all of that carrot into a measuring cup and transfer those 3 cups worth of shredded carrots into said bowl. Now with that done, move this to the side because we need to prep our cake tins. And to do that, you'll grab your tin, followed by some parchment paper and your trustiest pen, or whatever you can find laying around your kitchen. We'll be using the parchment paper to prevent our cakes from sticking, so conjuring all of that art prowess that you developed in elementary school, you'll trace out the base of your tin before grabbing your scissors and cutting out a circle, or at least something close to it. Then just repeat this for your other tin and you are good to go. Oh, and FYI, we are using some 10-inch pans here, but you can of course use whatever you have. Just make sure they are the same size since we're making a layered cake. Anyways, with our tins prepped, move them to the side because we're going to start the base of our cakes, starting with our dry ingredients. So in a large bowl, pour in 2 cups of all-purpose flour, followed by 2 teaspoons of baking soda and a half a teaspoon of salt. For that familiar spice flavor, we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 1/4 of a teaspoon of allspice, and around 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground or grated nutmeg. Now, of course, you can modify these flavors to your preferences, but just remember that these spices are quite strong and can overwhelm the nice balance that we're looking for in a good carrot cake. With everything in the bowl, grab yourself a whisk and give these dry ingredients a thorough mix until everything is nicely combined. Now, in a separate bowl, we're going to combine our wet ingredients, the first of which will be 1 cup of canola oil. So pour that in as majestically as possible before reaching for 1 cup of granulated sugar. With that in the bowl, we will want to cut all of that sweetness with nothing because this is a cake and there will be sweetness. So grab another cup of sugar, this time brown, and dump that into your bowl. Finally, you want to finish off the wet ingredients with 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract before grabbing your trusty whisk and mixing until smooth. Once you've reached a smooth consistency, it's time to find yourself some eggs, and that's 3 eggs to be exact. Now, it's tempting to toss all these in at once, but you'll actually want to incorporate them one at a time to make sure everything gets nicely blended. So toss in your first egg, mix until fully incorporated, and then repeat for egg number 2 and egg number 3. With your eggs nicely blended and your wet ingredients now fully combined, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. So now we've got a bowl of wet and a bowl of dry, so it's finally time to combine everything. So grab your bowl of dry and begin to incorporate it into the wet, using your trusty rubber spatula, of course. Now, you'll want to add in your dry mix gradually, about 1/4 of the mixture at a time, and make sure you mix thoroughly before adding your next batch. Then just repeat this process by adding in your dry and a bit of elbow grease to mix thoroughly until it's smooth, and you should end up with a nicely combined cake batter that looks a little bit like this. So with that done, we're missing one thing, and that is a bit of texture, which we're going to add to this carrot cake by chopping up some nuts. And in this case, I'm using 1 cup of pecans or pecans, depending where you come from, which we're going to give a rough chop. Now, if you're not a fan of pecans, you can swap these out for walnuts or go half and half. It's really up to you. But the nuts add a nice texture and pair very nicely with the spices and sweetness of this cake. So they're definitely worth having in my opinion. And speaking of this cake, it's finally time to turn this cake into carrot cake. So grab your bowl of shredded carrots and just dump that entire thing in there. No need to do this in batches like we did before. What you will want to do though is gently fold in the carrots to keep them as whole as possible, as this will give you better moisture and texture. And on the topic of texture, let's drop in those pecans and then give this a final mix to incorporate everything. Now you'll notice that these pecans are raw and could be elevated by dry roasting them in a pan, but we're going to keep things nice and simple here. Right, so with our mixture, well, mixed, we just need to evenly split our batter across our 2 baking tins. Now, something to keep in mind here is not to fill these tins to the top. You want to keep some space to allow the batter to actually expand as it bakes. So depending on the size of your tins, you may need to add a little less batter or split it across another tin. But in any case, with your tins loaded up, it's time to pop these into your preheated oven at 350 degrees for around 40 minutes. And now we wait. And just like that, with the magic of editing, it's been 40 minutes and we've let this cool down for an additional 10 minutes. So really it's actually been more like 50 minutes, but I digress. Anyways, with your cakes baked, we want to make sure that they cool fully. So flip these onto a wire rack and, well, let them cool. And while these are cooling, this is actually a perfect time to make our cream cheese icing. And to do that, we're going to take advantage of our stand mixer. So in your mixing bowl, drop in 250 grams of cream cheese. That is 1 whole brick, as you see here. And then head over to your stand mixer, pop on the mixing paddle, and set this to a low speed for about 10 seconds. Once this is broken up a bit, go ahead and boost this to a high speed to create a smooth consistency. So after about 10 to 15 seconds on high speed, the cream cheese should be looking nice and smooth. So this is a great time to grab your 1 cup or about 110 grams of powdered sugar. You want to incorporate this slowly though, so add about a 1/4 cup at a time to make sure that there are no clumps. Then just repeat this process until all that powdered sugar has been added to your bowl and thoroughly combined. And if you didn't think cream cheese icing wasn't healthy enough already, then boy do I have some bad news for you. Because we need to give this icing that silky, creamy texture that you expect, so that means adding, well, cream. So grab 1/3 cup of whipping cream and drop that into your mixture and continue to let this run. After about 30 seconds or so, your icing should look something like this. A creamy, smooth texture with a tart, tangy sweetness that is everything you think of when you hear cream cheese icing. Now with that done though, we want to move this to the side because it's time to actually ice our cake. Now in my case, luckily I've got this cake platter, which is a great place to ice a cake. So if you don't have one, that's okay. You can do this on any dish, but this does make life a little bit easier. So place that first cake down and then carefully cut a thin layer off the top. And here is where I want to point out 2 very important things, which maybe we'll call tips. The first is, since we have a slightly rounded cake, we actually want to have this first layer be totally level or flat, meaning we should have cut more off this top layer. Next, as we're beginning to drop the icing down onto the cake, you'll notice that it's slightly runny. This is due in part because the cakes have some slight residual heat, but also because our icing was mixed vigorously in our stand mixer. So I'd recommend letting your icing chill in the fridge for about 5 or so minutes just to firm up, and then also allowing those cakes to cool completely. So as we stack that second layer on top and begin to ice it, well, it starts to slide. Not good. This can be a pretty frustrating issue, especially if you are planning on transporting this cake like we are. So to fix this, we have to basically start over, at least when it comes to our icing. So we remade our icing and let it cool in the fridge while we strip off the icing from our cake and then cut off a little bit more of that base layer to make it a lot more even. Now with those small corrections, as we spread the icing, you can see it has a much better consistency, but it's also got a much more even layer to sit on. Now once you've respread the icing, grab that rather ragged looking top layer and drop it back on. Then just add some more icing on top and spread it as evenly as you can along the top and along the sides. And there you go, our cake is looking a lot better, so it's time to add some final touches, which is going to be a smattering of finely chopped pecans over the top. So just drop those over top, and just like that, our rustic carrot cake is done. Really, the only thing left to do here is to cut into this sweet spice treat and see what we're working with. And as you can see, even with our initial struggles with the icing, we've got a pretty nice cross section. The cake looks moist, has a great color and texture, and all in all is going to be a pretty delicious treat. And honestly, this is truly a great recipe for anyone who's starting their baking or confectionery journey. It's simple, it's very forgiving, and it's perfect for anyone who enjoys a mild sweet flavor with a spiced nutty crunch, someone like myself, for example. In any case, I hope this inspires you to hop into the kitchen and whip out your stand mixer and give this a shot. But yeah, that's it for me, guys, so thank you so much for watching until the end of this video, and as always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.